Ever wondered why your plants don't thrive? Picture a plant, once lush and vibrant, now wilting, its leaves shriveling, its life slipping away. This is the unfortunate fate of too many houseplants. Often it's not a lack of care but rather a surplus of it, or perhaps neglect. A plant's demise can be a mystery, leaving you scratching your head and asking, what did I do wrong? But don't despair, fellow green thumbs. Stay tuned to find out how to avoid such mishaps. There are several common mistakes that can lead to this kind of disaster. Let's dive right into it. One of the most common gardening mistakes is overwatering. It's easy to think that more water equals more growth, but in reality it can lead to root rot and a slow plant death. It's a bit like feeding a kid too much candy. A little is good, too much, and things start to go wrong. Next on our list is using the incorrect soil type. Each plant has its own unique needs, and soil is no exception. Using the wrong soil can be like trying to grow a cactus in a swamp. It just doesn't work. Some plants prefer acidic soils while others thrive in alkaline conditions. It's crucial to match the soil to the plant for optimum growth. Now, let's talk about climate. Planting in unsuitable climate conditions is another common gardening fail. A plant that loves the sun isn't going to do well in a shady spot, no matter how much you might want it to. It's important to understand the climate requirements of each plant and place them accordingly. Trying to grow a palm tree in Alaska, for instance, is going to end in disappointment. Another mistake is over-fertilizing. Fertilizer is like vitamins for plants, necessary in the right amounts but harmful in excess. Over-fertilization can burn the roots and damage the plant. It's like going to the gym and trying to lift too much weight on the first day. It's not going to end well. Lastly, let's talk about improper pruning. Pruning is necessary for plant health and growth, but incorrect pruning can lead to disease and even death. It's like going to the hairdresser and ending up with a botched haircut. Only in this case, the plant can't just wait for it to grow back. But don't worry, we've got the solutions to these problems. Now let's get to the good stuff, how to garden the right way. First things first, soil. It's the lifeblood of your garden, and getting it right is critical. If you recall, our friend from scene 2 had a bit of a mishap with incorrect soil types. So how do we avoid this? Well, it's all about understanding your plants and their needs. Some plants thrive in sandy soils while others prefer clay or silt. It's a bit like cooking, really. You wouldn't use olive oil for deep frying, would you? Next up, climate conditions. This is a big one. Every plant has a comfort zone, and if you're trying to grow a cactus in Alaska, well, you're in for a rough time. Before you buy a plant, take a moment to research its native climate. If you live in a place with harsh winters, opt for hardy plants that can withstand the cold. And if you're in a hot, dry area, look for plants that are adapted to drought conditions. Now let's talk about tools. Gardening tools aren't just fancy accessories. They're the bread and butter of your gardening endeavors. Using them incorrectly can lead to damaged plants and a disappointing harvest. For example, we've all seen that person who treats a spade like a crowbar, right? Remember, a spade is for digging, not prying. Then there's the science behind it all. We're talking about pH levels, photosynthesis, the works. It might seem like a lot, but don't worry, we've got you covered. Let's take pH levels, for example. Most plants prefer slightly acidic to neutral soil, but there are exceptions. Blueberries, for instance, love acidic soil. It's like their version of a spa day. Speaking of science, let's not forget about fertilizers. Our overzealous friend from scene 2 learned this the hard way. Fertilizers are not a one-size-fits-all solution. Different plants have different nutritional needs, and using the wrong fertilizer can do more harm than good. So, make sure to read the label and follow the instructions. Lastly, let's talk about watering. Watering seems simple enough, but it's actually one of the most common areas where gardeners slip up. Overwatering can lead to root rot, while underwatering can leave your plants high and dry. The key is to strike a balance. Most plants prefer when their soil is kept evenly moist but not soaking wet. In the end, gardening is a process of trial and error. But with a little knowledge and patience, you can turn those errors into triumphs. And remember, gardening is not just about the end result. It's about the journey. The satisfaction of seeing a seed you planted grow into a beautiful plant is second to none. So, don't be disheartened by the occasional misstep. Instead, learn from it. After all, every gardener, no matter how experienced, has had their share of epic fails. It's all part of the process. Remember, practice makes perfect. Everyone makes mistakes, and sometimes they're just downright funny. Ever seen a gardener tangled up in a hose like a scene straight out of a slapstick comedy? Or perhaps you've witnessed the classic scenario of a gardener chasing after a runaway wheelbarrow, arms flailing, shouting in surprise. And let's not forget the moment of shock when you realize you've been watering a plastic plant all summer. Yes, it's happened. The leaves look so real. It's easy to laugh now, but at the time, it was a blooming disaster. Then there's the mystery of the disappearing bulbs. You planted a dozen tulip bulbs in the fall, anticipating a beautiful spring display. But when spring arrives, there's no sign of them. Could it be a case of forgetful gardening, or perhaps a sneaky squirrel with a penchant for tulips? And who could overlook the epic battle with the garden hose? It starts as a simple task, watering the garden. But the rebellious hose has other plans. It kinks, it twists, it turns, and before you know it, you're soaked from head to toe and the plants are as dry as a desert. How about the time when you finally decided to prune that overgrown bush only to find out it was actually your neighbor's prized topiary masterpiece? Awkward. Then there's the classic over-ambitious gardener who decides to plant an entire vegetable garden in one afternoon. Armed with a shovel and a dream, they work tirelessly, only to realize at sunset that they've planted everything upside down. And finally, the gardener who, in their enthusiasm, mistakes poison ivy for a beautiful vine. Ouch! That's a mistake that leaves you itching for a solution. Yes, gardening is filled with opportunities for errors, blunders, and just plain old funny moments. But remember, every mistake is a chance to learn and grow. After all, even the most experienced gardeners have had their fair share of gardening gaffes. No matter how many mistakes you make, don't give up. There's always a solution. Let's quickly recap what we've learned today. Our journey through the garden of knowledge has been filled with a few thorny issues and some blooming insights. We've witnessed the tragic demise of a plant due to overwatering, the unfortunate consequences of using the wrong soil, and the havoc wreaked by unsuitable climate conditions. And let's not forget those pesky tools that sometimes seem to have a mind of their own. But we've also discovered the right way to navigate around these pitfalls. Remember that moderation is key when it comes to watering. A plant isn't a sponge, it doesn't need to be soaking wet all the time. Overwatering can lead to root rot and ultimately the death of your plant. Instead, aim to keep the soil as moist as a wrung-out sponge. We've also learned that soil isn't just dirt. It's a complex mix of minerals, organic matter, and life. Using the wrong type of soil can be detrimental to your plants. The right soil depends on the type of plant, but generally, a well-draining soil rich in organic matter is a safe bet. Next, we've established that climate matters a lot. Some plants thrive in the sun, while others prefer the shade. Some can handle a frost, while others need a tropical climate. Before you plant anything, make sure you know its climate preferences. And of course, we've seen how important it is to handle our tools correctly. A tool mishandled can result in injury to both the gardener and the garden. Always use your tools with care and respect. We've also had a laugh or two along the way, reminding us that gardening should be fun, and it's okay to make mistakes. The important thing is to learn from them and keep growing, just like our plants. Now it's your turn to step into the garden. Armed with these tips, you can avoid the common gardening mishaps we've discussed today. Remember, the key to successful gardening is to learn from our mistakes. Don't forget to subscribe for more insightful content. Happy gardening!